Getting set to hit, both Tehran and Jerusalem are intensifying their threats of military action in the face of the stalled nuclear negotiations in Vienna. But is it all just talk? The Islamic Republic said Monday it had conducted a defense drill near its Bushehr nuclear plant, warning it would have a, quote, crushing response to any Israeli attack. This is the second time this month that Iranian authorities report defense drills with large explosions heard both times. Iran has long been pointing fingers at Israel for several attacks on facilities linked to its nuclear program, including a major one in April at the Natanz site. But a senior Iranian commander further said Monday that Israel does not have the ability to strike Iran's nuclear or military bases without U.S. approval. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz not only begs to differ, but rather shared his view on the collapsing dynamic of the Vienna talks.
The internal situation in Iran is an opportunity for the world and for the region. Iran is not a regional power. Its citizens are suffering from a difficult economic situation. Their investment in development has dropped by half in the last decade, and it suffers from many internal problems as well as many external problems. The regime leaders in Iran are aware of their situation, so in my opinion, Iran is coming to negotiations in Vienna without significant bargaining chips.
Gantz wrapped up a high-profile visit in Washington recently where he met both U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, and is set to meet later on this week with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan to further deepen the Israeli-American cooperation over the Iranian issue. This as talks in Vienna are on hold for several days now, and the little hope that remained that a diplomatic solution to Iran's not-so-diplomatic ambitions can be reached seems to be losing ground.
And now for more discussion on the issues at hand between the U.S. and Israel, we're joined in the studio by our defense correspondent, Jonathan Regev. First of all, on the Iran nuclear issue, the big fish on the table here, how much do we know about the U.S. and Israel? How allied are they on this issue?
Well, they're allied on the fact that both countries do not want Iran to go further and actually get to the point where they have nuclear weapons. How to achieve that? Not aligned at all. In here, Israel time and time again says that basically there's no point in the nuclear negotiations because all the Iranians are doing is buying time and deceiving the West in order to proceed with their nuclear program. The U.S., as we know, is eager to go into negotiations. The United States, as important as the Iran issue is, has bigger issues. Russia is a bigger issue. China especially is a bigger issue. And they want to solve this diplomatically, not militarily. The U.S., we know, for the last few years is trying to get its forces back into the United States and not deploy them abroad. Therefore, there is a great difference in the way the U.S. and Israel see this. Having said that Israel does perhaps and continues to threat time and again regarding the military option, we also heard this week comments saying that Israel basically does not have the ability at the moment to bring down the entire Iranian nuclear program. Iran is not the same case as Iraq 40 years ago, where you hit the Osirak nuclear plant and that's it. It's not the same case as in Syria in 2007, where Israel allegedly hit the Deir Azur compound and that's it. Iran is a very big country. Its nuclear facilities are spread all over the country, and Israel probably, according to those intelligence officers, without American assistance, will not be able militarily to basically stop the Iranian nuclear program. Will the Americans be able to drag Israel their way more into negotiations, or will Israel be able to get the Americans their way more towards a military operation, or at least toughening the sanctions? That is what's on the table now.
It's been certainly what feels like ramped up bluster, threats flying back and forth between Iran and Israel. We've seen these headline stories in Tehran. From the Israeli defense establishment perspective, how tense is that issue right now, the potential for military action here? And on top of that, is Hezbollah, Lebanon, the main deterrent right now on Israel for a military strike?
The main deterrent, and an interesting issue regarding Hezbollah. What is Hezbollah? Is it an Iranian force, or is it a Lebanese force? Up until maybe a few months ago, it was understood that anything hitting Iran will bring retaliation from Hezbollah. So no one here in Israel thinks today that Hezbollah will sit quiet if Israel hits the Iranian installations. But how far will Hezbollah go? They understand very well that a strong response by Hezbollah will bring a terrible response for Lebanon, one that will take Lebanon years and years and years backwards from the very problematic place that it is right now. So this would be a great problem for Hassan Nasrallah, but it is also a great problem for Israel, because no one really knows how Hezbollah will react in the case that Israel strikes Syria, Israel strikes Iran. I mean, also in Syria, there are Iranian proxies. So many issues there. And yes, Hezbollah, of course, being the main deterrent for Israel in a strike against Iran, understanding very well that a strike on Iran might probably bring some kind of a response from Hezbollah. How strong will that response be? It is unclear. Hezbollah has the means and the ability to hurt Israel, loud and clear.
Certainly, we'll stay tuned. Daily developments have been emerging on this, certainly with the visit of U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Likely to hear some more on this topic. Jonathan Reggett, for now, thanks for the latest.
Thank you.